On today's Murder, She Wrote podcast, we find ourselves in the Mediterranean on a really secluded island where there's, of course, murder. Would you expect anything less? Hello, and welcome to the Murder, She Wrote podcast, where I watch every single episode of the hit 80s/90s show Murder, She Wrote, starring 3-time Academy Award nominee and 5-time Tony Award winner Miss Angela Lansbury. Today I'm going to be talking about Season 1, Episode 14, Paint Me a Murder. Guys, I apologize so much. I mixed up the episode numbers. Let me explain. I had to go back and I had to retitle some of my videos here on YouTube because I messed up the episode numbers. The first thing of Murder, She Wrote is The Murder of Sherlock Holmes, and that is a pilot movie. It is not an episode. In syndication, it was put into 2 different parts, which is not the way it originally aired. So, the first episode of the actual season of Murder, She Wrote is Deadly Lady. It is not episode 2, it is episode 1. And I apologize so much. I got so wrapped up in enjoying myself watching the episodes again and getting the podcast out and everyone loving it and enjoying it that I messed up the numbers and did not realize that I was actually on episode 14, not episode 13, and that I messed up the episode titles, the episode numbers. And I promise you from now on that that's not going to happen. Thanks to Wikipedia, I now know, what episode numbers they're supposed to be and exactly when they aired, because I was following IMDb and they list the pilot movie as 2 different episodes, which threw me off. So there are a couple of, if you're new to the podcast, there are a couple of episodes, especially the last one and the last 2, that have the episode number on the collage that I have, on the picture or the collage I have made for the episode. For instance, in Broadway Melody, which is episode 11, it says, hold on just a second. It says episode 13, and it's episode 11. And then on Murder to a Jazz Beat, it says episode 14, but it's actually episode 12. And in the last episode, it says episode 15, but it's actually episode 13. And I apologize so much for this, you guys. I did not realize that I had the wrong episode numbers. And this is not going to happen in Season 2. When I start Season 2, it's straightforward. I mean, you start off pretty much, with episode 1 and you go from there. I mean, I don't like that they did this. It's so confusing. But I promise you from now on, the right number will be on the episodes, okay? Before I get started and dive into this episode, Paint Me a Murder, which is episode 14, I'm going to remind you again, It was episode 14, not but all the numbers are correct now, so this is episode 14. All right, I apologize again. I want to thank everyone in my 2 Facebook groups that I'm a part of. Jessica Fletcher, Murder She Wrote, thank you, is the first one. Thank you so much for all your support. It just warms my heart that you all love it so much, and you're like, please continue posting about it. We can't wait to see for more of your episodes to come and what you think of the episodes. And thank you to the ones that are watching it on Peacock, because it's not on Hallmark Mysteries and Drama right now because of the Christmas movies and such, and you're following along with me. And in the second group, All Things Murder She Wrote, thank you all for your support. It means the world to me, and I'm going to continue. I have about 7 episodes left of season 1, and I am going to watch them and post them as quickly as I can, because I'm doing really good. Knock on wood. Yes, I just actually knocked on wood, so that I continue to be healthy throughout the rest of December, I hope, and I can get these episodes out. So I just did it again for good measure. This episode I had to watch 3 times because there's so many characters in it. So here we go. We start off with the beautiful ocean as the opening credits play. We find ourselves in a beautiful yellow mansion. I have seen this house before, but I cannot find out where this was filmed. I don't know if it was filmed on the Universal backlot or another studio backlot, but the house looks so familiar to me. Someone is on the top of it trying to cut off a stone vase as the opening credits play over him taking a chisel and hitting it with a hammer to loosen it. Like I said, this episode had a lot of characters in it, and it was so hard to keep track of. It was written by Peter S. Fletcher and directed by John Lywell Loxley. We find ourselves, it's now during the day. There are a bunch of kids sitting on a lawn. The house is in the background, and they are painting what appears to be either a horse or a donkey. I can't tell. And he's teaching children how to paint. This one guy says, who's named Willard, and this other woman named Elaine is there at his mansion getting drinks. And he's a failed playwright. He hasn't had a play in about 10 to 15 years. And then he asks where Belle is. We find out that they're all gathered here for the 60th birthday party of Diego Santana, who is a famous painter. You see, he's turning 60 years old, and he has invited his ex-wife, Belle, to the party, where his current wife, Margot, is also there. So he starts asking where Belle is, and he starts insulting her. And Elaine says he's disgusting. And he says she should be able to make an effort and make her, at least herself, look presentable. Which is horrible. I don't like this guy. I seriously don't. Excuse me. So Belle comes out and she says, You're losing your style, Willard. Normally you used to insult me to my face. And he says, well, the first rule of eavesdropping is never complain if you don't like what you hear. And she goes, ha ha ha. So then we get introduced to Margot, who comes out to bring snacks to the kids, who's painting out on the lawn because Diego apparently gives little kids lessons to paint. More artists should do that. So then we get introduced to Henry. He is an inspector, and I guess he's there for the party too. She asks him to go over to the balcony where Willard and Elaine and Belle are, to sort of break up a fight, even though in my opinion no fight is happening. He says he'll go over there and he'll try to do what he can. And Margot gives cakes and cookies to the kids. And his name is Henry. And he goes, I'm not coming to defend you, Willard. And then they are talking about who owns one of Diego's paintings. Henry says he owns a pencil sketch. Belle says she owns one, and she also mentions that Willard just bought one from one of her friends. And Elaine says she's the only one who doesn't have an original Diego Santana painting, which apparently this guy in this universe is supposed to be a well-known painter. So that's good. That's awesome. And he seems like a very nice guy. And Jessica's not introduced it's not in the episode until we're like 13 minutes in. And we're introduced to all these characters. Believe me, you guys, it was hard to keep them straight in the episode. Really hard. So then Willard asks where Miguel is. He is Diego's son, who has overcome a drug addiction, and he's talking to his girlfriend Maria, whom his father said he's not allowed to see. She's apparently associating with some people that she shouldn't associate with, so he has to go help her. I think later it's revealed that she's in jail and he had to sell some of his father's paintings to try to get her out. The kids end up leaving, and they thank him and say goodbye. I guess this isn't a private island if there's a bunch of kids there. Later they say it's a private island, but if it's a private island, how are there a bunch of kids there? I don't know. A woman speaks Spanish to him, and then she leaves. And she asks him to have Jessica sign her book. And Diego tells Henry that his friend Jessica is coming to visit him, and Henry says, mystery writers, especially women mystery writers, are all uppity. They talk about corpses can be buried in a garden. So then Elaine goes into a studio with Stefan, who has made a sculpture of her husband. He says that it was quite a challenge creating something worthy of the master himself. She says, it's the best work you've ever done. It's a labor of love. And he goes, love, really? He goes, not love, Margot, gratitude for him. He clearly has romantic feelings for her, but she's married to Diego, so she basically tells him to leave her alone. He kisses her, and she's like, no, leave me alone, you creep. And he goes, you're married to a man twice your age because you, for security. And she goes, well, he loves me. And he goes, well, do you love him? and she leaves and he leaves her alone with the statue, and we're not sure if she does love him. Suddenly we find ourselves at dinner. All the guests are there, and Diego decides to propose a toast. He says that Jessica will be arriving tomorrow with his colleague Sir John Langley, and he says that he's lucky to reach his 60th birthday in the company of so many loving friends who traveled to his island of security to share the happiness and joy of his life. He loves his wife Margot, who's wearing a blue dress. It's really a pretty, beautiful dress. And he also toasts his son Miguel, who has gotten off drugs. And everyone toasts to all of them. And then Diego has prepared a surprise for one of them. Elaine McCormick, his dear friend, devoted most of her adult life to the welfare of unprivileged children throughout the African continent. And he has given her a painting of his, because she's the only one of his friends, I guess, that doesn't have one. I guess Jessica has one too. I don't know. I don't remember if it's ever mentioned throughout the episode. In case you're wondering what I'm doing, since this episode was so hard to keep track of who the characters were, I'm rewatching it again as I'm recording the episode. Believe me, it helps me out. Elaine is overcome with emotion, and this seems like a wonderful moment. She thanks him, and he says there's no need for her to do that. He was put on this earth to share his talent with the world, and that's what he intends to do. Later that night, someone waits on the balcony smoking cigarettes where the vase bust is that got loosened earlier in the episode. Diego is outside playing his guitar and singing a song in Spanish while in his robe. The person stands on top of the balcony waiting for the precise moment to push the vase over on top of his head, which reminds me of that wonderful movie Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte with Bette Davis, a really great movie. Margot comes out to see Diego and holds up a drink for him. He continues playing and smiles at her and begins walking towards her. The person is pushing the vase, and we think, as the audience, it's gonna hit him. But he sees it falling just in time and gets out of the way. Margot runs over him and asks him if he's okay. He says he is, and he claims it's an accident, that the old place needs repairs. And as soon as the guests leave, they'll start them. Later on, Elaine and Willard are fishing, and Belle, Diego, and Henry all come down just as Jessica's plane arrives. Helicopter. At exactly 13 minutes into the episode, Jessica finally appears after the introduction of all these characters. She comes out and she's so happy to see Diego and Diego's friend, Sir John. I don't know why he's called Sir John. And he asks, "How was your trip?" And she says it was wonderful. And he introduces his ex-wife Belle and Henry Kyle, the inspector, and they introduce Jessica to all of them. And Belle says that she loves her books and that she fools her every time. Just like we love the episodes and sometimes they fool us every time. And Mr. Kyle realizes, the inspector, suddenly something is wrong with Willard. He goes into the ocean and something is awfully wrong with him. Elaine says that he's drowning, and everyone, including Jessica, runs over to help him. He gets taken away in a helicopter because something is wrong. Miguel comes up wondering what happened. I'm guessing the beach is not that far from the house. Diego at first wants to go to the mainland with him, but Miguel insists upon going. So Miguel goes with Willard in the helicopter and flies off, leaving Jessica on the island with the rest of them. They all watch the helicopter walk away. Fly away. I have no idea where they filmed this. I wonder if they filmed it on the Universal backlot or something. So Diego takes Jessica for a little walk. He wants to talk to her. It turns out that he does not believe that... He says that one day he had vowed to find an island, and he did. In the Mediterranean. And he goes, I wish it were true, my dear friend, but the threat of death hangs over this paradise. I believe someone is trying to kill me. And Jessica's like, well, I heard it was an accident. And she said, oh, no accidents, Jessica. I saw him, a shadowy figure, as I leapt out of the way. Somebody was up on that balcony, and they tried to kill me. And then Jessica says, well, notify the police. And she says, and put my attacker on guard? No, Jessica. I want you to learn who is trying to kill me. And he says, well, you're a detective. Your talents as a detective are very well known. So this is quite interesting to me because apparently now that we're in episode 14, her detective work is now very well known. She has been solving quite a lot of crimes, and word has gotten around. I always wondered about that. I was like, do people know she solves crimes as well as writes mystery novels? And this confirms it. They do. So he wants her to help figure out who's trying to kill him. Alright. And she says, but there's a real detective here. He says, but unlike you, Henry was on the island last night. Now the villa is directly above this beach. Now over to the west is a small, treacherous stretch of beach known only to a few people, but a small boat might be landed. Otherwise, this island is inaccessible. You're saying that whoever tried to kill you is one of your guests? Yes, my friend. He says that's exactly what I'm saying. So we go back to the house, and Belle is playing the piano. Elaine comes in, and suddenly Belle stops playing. Elaine says, don't stop, I was enjoying it. And she goes, no more today. Maybe tomorrow I can play something like Happy Birthday. And she goes out to get some fresh air. Sir John comes in and says she was such a promising pianist in her day. And he congratulates her on getting her painting from Diego and says that he can put it up for auction for her and he won't charge her his usual fees for doing so. Which, I wouldn't do that if I were her. I would keep it. Why would she put it up for auction? It clearly meant something to her when she got it, so why would she put it up? Why would she sell it? That doesn't make any sense to me. But it seems she agrees to sell it. Meanwhile, Mrs. Fletcher goes up on the balcony and finds the 2 cigarettes from the random guy that knocked down the vase earlier in the episode. And she finds a matchbook. Inspector Inspector Kyle, comes up and says, have you found a clue? And she goes, a clue? Oh, what made you think of that? And he says, I know that Diego's so-called accident, he's have you on the case because I'm one of the suspects. And he says, I noticed that there were chisel marks on the vase, meaning someone tampered with it to make it fall. So he's aware that someone is trying to kill Diego too. And he knows that Mrs. Fletcher's on the case because Diego trusts her more than he trusts him. So he's not as dumb as he looks. They're going over suspects, and they're trying to figure out exactly who could it be. They confer that the killer that knocked down the urn has to be left-handed, and that they'd have to be pretty strong to knock down one of those marble urns that's on the top of the balcony. And they even deduce that it's 170 pounds without a tape measure. Damn, Mrs. Fletcher is good, isn't she? She also reveals that she found the cigarette butts lying on top of underneath the cement base. And Henry says, so they were up here, and while he was... And he goes, very clever. And she goes, not so clever, because she said, why didn't you discover these clues instead of me? And he goes, this is the first time I've been up here. You beat me to them, but they prove nothing. He says Elaine McCormick is a heavy smoker. And Mrs. Fletcher says, well, I found some matches. The matches were torn from the left side. And that is how she determines that the person is left-handed. Interesting. I didn't know that left-handed people did that. And the only one that smoked left-handed was Willard, who got carried away in the helicopter and is on the mainland. So maybe it was him. Suddenly, Stefan and Diego are having an argument. And I guess Margot told him about Stefan kissing her. So they're having an argument. And he says, you don't warn me, I warn you. And Henry points out that he is not left-handed. And Mrs. Fletcher says, well, then we're back to square one. That leaves us with Willard, and he's off the island, so we have no idea who the killer is. Or attempted murderer. But Elaine has been standing outside listening to this conversation this whole entire time. Later, Henry is on the phone talking to someone from the mainland. He asks to speak to Miguel, but Miguel is not there. Miguel disappeared shortly after they got to the mainland. And he did have a heart attack, and it was genuine. He had rapid and irregular heartbeats. So, at the moment, he's resting comfortably, so he's okay. I don't think he comes back in the episode. And Diego says, I can't believe it. Willard is the one that did this? And Margot says, he's always been jealous of your success. He hasn't had a play in years, so what do you expect? But Diego refuses to believe it, especially considering that it means that someone else close to him had to do it. And Mrs. Fletcher says, this is merely an educated guess. This is not a definite thing. We don't know if it's him. And Diego says, do not breathe a word of this to anyone else. He does not want anything to interfere with his birthday celebration. I don't blame him. I don't want it. So then suddenly, Diego is dressed in a dinner jacket, holding a crossbow, and he's showing it to Sir John. Belle comes down, and they talk about the they talk about the bow, the crossbow, and Sir John asks, how can you have your ex-wife here and your current wife Margot in the same roof? And he says, it's contagious. It's just about love. Henry gestures for Mrs. Fletcher to come over and see him as Belle starts to play something on the piano for everyone, even though she had trouble earlier, or the day before. Henry says that he'd just spoken to some reliable friends in London. For the past several months, Willard has been quietly buying up Diego Santana paintings. And Mrs. Fletcher says, well, I thought he was broke. And he says, well, the one question is, where did he get the money? And the other question is, why? And then she says, well, the why is obvious. A painting by a living artist is one thing, but once the artist dies, it's quite another. The painting would be worth quite a bit of money. Belle can't play anymore and runs out the door. We're unsure exactly what happened, something with her hands. I think she has arthritis. Which is so sad. Because apparently she used to be a really good pianist. And Mrs. Fletcher talks about Willard's play to Sir John. And she goes, were you aware that he was buying all of Diego's paintings? And he says, well, I haven't heard that. And she says, well, if anyone, you would know. Well, actually, Jess. He goes, apart from this morning, I haven't seen Willard since the Derby at Espen in April. Okay. And then suddenly the conversation's over. And Sir John decides to go to sleep. And Elaine assures Belle that everything was lovely. And she goes, oh, please, Elaine, I didn't stop playing because my hands hurt. I stopped playing because she saw the way that Diego was looking at Margot and saw the way that she was looking at Diego, the same way she used to look at him. And she's been trying very hard for the past 3 days to continue the charade of pretending, or well, not pretending, of being his ex-wife and seeing him with his current wife. Of course, we have no idea why their relationship did not work out and why she's his ex-wife. And she's not even Miguel's mother. She's his second ex-wife. His first ex-wife, Miguel's mother, died under mysterious circumstances, I guess, or just died of heart disease or something. It's not abundantly clear. Later that same night, someone steals the crossbow. Uh-oh. It's the next morning. We get a beautiful shot of the sunset. So beautiful. It's 6 a.m. Diego is up walking with his dog. Jogging, I think. And of course, Jessica is out jogging too because she does that. I don't wake up at 6 a.m. I wake up at 9 a.m. and then I go walking around the block around that time, but not at 6 o'clock in the morning. Can't do 6 o'clock in the morning. Jessica then notices when she's walking that there's a boat on shore. She has no idea whose boat that is, and she goes looking for someone to tell about it. Suddenly on top of the hill, we see Diego with his dog walking again, and there's a person on top of the hill with a crossbow pointed right at him, and he puts one of the arrows in it and gets ready to fire. As Mrs. Fletcher is walking, suddenly Henry comes out of the woods, breathless and out of breath. And he goes, and she says, "What are you doing out here? You seem very out of breath." And he goes, "I've been hurrying. When I found out that you were missing, I got worried and decided to go looking for you." And she was like, well, I have to go back to the house. And she goes, I must talk to Diego. And suddenly we hear screaming. Diego's dead, guys. Whoever shot the crossbow bullseye in the back. The man is dead and Elaine has found his body. I don't know how she got down there because she wasn't there before. This is never really explained. And suddenly, Stefan is in the woods and he discovers the crossbow. And I guess he doesn't put two and two together and for some reason decides not to tell anyone he found it. They bring Diego's body back to his house on a stretcher. Belle sees him and immediately starts crying and screaming. They take him upstairs to his bedroom on the stretcher. Damn, this actor is phenomenal. I can't even see his belly moving up and down to indicate he's breathing. Margot comes in and they have to tell her that Diego is dead. She runs upstairs where he's now laying in his bed. They take the stretcher away, which actually looks like a piece of fence that they took off somewhere. Margot comes in and starts crying, and Stefan comes in and sees that Diego is dead. And this sets up, this is kind of like Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None. They're all stuck in this mansion now because the phone has been broken. There's no way to call out. And the killer is on the loose on the island. And they find that the crossbow is missing. And the radio's been smashed beyond compare. They're completely isolated. There's no way off the island. Henry says, things are not quite as desperate as they seem, ladies and gentlemen. Miguel may return from the mainland, or he may try to raise us on the radio phone without success. And he might decide to investigate and come get us. We must simply wait until tomorrow morning, when the helicopter arrives to return us to the mainland. This is kind of like Gilligan's Island meets And Then There Were None. Because they're isolated on this island. What are they going to do? And they're like, well, we need to find the missing crossbow. And Stefan's like, I'll help you look. Dude, you know where it is. Henry decides to stay behind with the women, but Mrs. Fletcher decides to go looking for the crossbow. Oh wait, no she doesn't, I'm sorry. And Jessica says, I'm not sure that I can trust you. And she says, with the killer on the loose, I don't know if it's necessarily one of us. And he goes, what? What are you talking about? She goes, I'll show you. So they go back to the shore and she shows him the boat. And there's someone getting on it and about to row away. Henry sees him and starts running towards him, screaming for the person to stop. It turns out to be Miguel. Jessica goes running into the ocean to get the package, and from behind it doesn't look like Jessica. It doesn't look like Angela Lansbury. I think it was a stunt double. So they go back to the house, and it turns out that he was smuggling his father's paintings off the island. And Margot comes in and says, why did you have to kill him? And he says, I swear to the Holy Mother, I didn't even know he was dead. And he explains that he snuck back on the island to get the paintings, not to kill him. He went back on the helicopter to be with her. But his father ordered him not to see that girl. There's a warrant for her arrest, and she needed money so the lawyers could bribe some important officials. So he was going to pawn the paintings to get money for her. And he says he didn't kill him. And Sir John says, I find that hard to believe. He gives the crossbow to Henry and accuses Miguel of doing it. And Jessica says, well, it seems to me if he was the one that did it, he would have tried to take the crossbow with him, not left it behind. And he says, I have no reason to kill my father. Margot gets everything. I mean, so that basically eliminates him as a suspect in my book. And he goes in the workshop. There's dozens of paintings in that room that Dago's been working on for the past year. No one knew that there were paintings in there. And Margot, and they say, you're not accusing your stepmother of murder, are you? And he says no. He accuses Sir John of murder and pretty much everyone else in the room because everyone stood to gain from his murder except for Miguel. And Sir John hits him. And he goes to hit Sir John back, but Margot stops him. Later that same day, Jessica is taking a rake and she's going through some sand. I have no idea why she's doing this. I forget why she started doing it. Henry comes and makes a joke and says, this would be quite amusing. Seaside gardening, I've never seen it before. She said, I can't help but think there might be some connection between Willard's unexpected heart attack and the first attempt on Diego's life. And he goes to following her, and what is the connection? She said, Willard's coronary was something else, a drug-induced attack that stimulated a heart seizure. I mean, it could have been caused by something. And she goes, I think that seems far-fetched. You're assuming you're right. Why would he do such a thing? Panic. I mean, he failed in his attempt on Diego. He had to get off the island. This was the escape route that he could come up with. And he says, but Diego was killed this morning. Willard was taken off the island yesterday morning. And he's been hospitalized ever since. So in the sand, Jessica finds what appears to be a needle. And it contained a medicine that caused Willard to look like he had a heart attack, but he actually didn't. And it seems as if Stefan has gotten away. So now we assume that Stefan is the murderer because he saw the crossbow and didn't tell anyone and then said he was going to go look for it, and now he hasn't come back. Henry is also looking for Stefan. Miguel comes and says the raft is missing. So it appears that Stefan has left the island. His last name is Conrad. By the time they notify the authorities, he'll be miles away. It's suddenly night again. We get a beautiful shot of the ocean and the moon. It's absolutely beautiful. Jessica is sleeping and wakes up to the sound of crackling, and there's a fire in the studio that was mentioned earlier. It's completely on fire. Jessica starts screaming, "Fire, Henry, fire!" And she goes running out. Miguel goes in. Henry goes in first, knocking open the door, and they find Margot lying on the floor in her robe in the middle of the studio. The other ones are trying to figure out how to put the fire out, and their sources are limited since they are all alone. They take her to the house, and they basically let the studio burn, I guess. Oh wait, they were able to put out the fire. Margot is okay, she did not die. Elaine asks Margot to tell us what happened, and Margot says, honestly, she has no clue. She could not sleep, so she went for a walk outside. She thought she heard someone in the shed, and she went in there. The door was open, and the lock had been smashed. I saw that a small fire had been started in the corner. She started to go inside. Suddenly somebody grabbed her from behind and grabbed her neck. She couldn't breathe. And Mrs. Fletcher says, was it a man? She says, I do not know. And she goes, was it a man's arm or a woman's arm? And she goes, a man's, I think. It was very strong. And she goes, I'd like to try a little experiment and I need your cooperation. She's like, okay. Isn't it amazing how everyone goes along with what Jessica wants them to do? She said, now stand here, and you said that someone came up and grabbed you. She says, how, like this? And she gasps, and she's like, no, I don't think so. Okay, she was like, then like this, and she grabs her with her hand up near her throat, and she goes, yes, just like that. And Belle goes, what does that mean? It means that Margot's assailant was right-handed. Is that so unusual? And she goes, just the unexpected. And Henry says it's too dark to locate anyone now. And they'll have to wait till it's daylight. Stefan... And he said, that's Stefan did it. Who else? He's left the island, and he was waiting for his chance to destroy those paintings out of jealousy. Stefan could have not do that. He's not a killer. And she says he's a refugee from Bulgaria. He's a scientist who deflected over 10 years ago. He changed his identity and went into hiding. So he's from a different country, and he's hiding from the secret police. He's on their death list. Then it must have been Stefan who disabled the radio to give himself time to escape. Yes, I'm sure that is it. I'm sure. And she goes, Belle says, well, if he's innocent, why would he need to escape? Because once the police arrived there, his real identity was sure to come out, says Mrs. Fletcher. He had to run. Interesting turn there. Sir John says they weren't able to save any of the paintings, that all the paintings have gone up in flames. And he's upset about it. He says, now I'll keep my painting. And Miguel says, right, Sir John? Now it'll increase in value now that your good friend is dead. And he says, poor Miguel, it must be very difficult to be limited in your talents and live in the shadow of a true genius. What a jerk. So everyone turns in for the night. Oh wait, no. Henry comes, and he asks Jessica if she should go to bed. And she says, I believe we were wrong about Willard. Henry starts to yawn, and she says, I don't believe that he sneaked back on the island and shot Diego. And he was like, well, that was always unlikely anyway, so what is it? And she doesn't believe that that Diego was shot by Stefan either. And she goes, I know who's responsible. And she asks what time that the helicopter is coming at 10 in the morning. Alright, guys. So the killer turns out to be, and believe me, we got a lot of suspects. So spoiler alert if you've not seen